What are we complaining about?
No, we're not complaining about anything. We gotta do intros.
What intros?
Hi, I'm Chris,
I'm Jay.
and this is Icewind Dale.
No, this is Grumpy Dungeon Masters. Good evening, Craig. Welcome to the podcast. What's up, Chris?
Hooray! I forgot I'm on push to talk and not.
Oh, I just thought that was enthusiasm seeping out of you. That was like the most lackluster anything I've ever heard from you. It reminded me of fucking Eeyore. Oh, bother.
Eeyore is my spirit animal. I have him tattooed on my butt.
I kind of want to know if that's true, but I don't want to know if that's true because that means I'd have to see it to verify it, and I'll pass on that.
So, Icewind Dale was released. What?
Rime of the
15th.
Yeah. Which kind of screwed up my current game, but whatever.
So it was released on the 15th, and you didn't get a chance to pick it up until late last week.
A week later. So it was weird because my initial plans were to run a month long or so short campaign in my own world setting, and I don't know why, because I knew it was coming out on the 15th of September, and my brain just did not register that for some reason. So I started that mini campaign on pretty much the weekend when the book was coming out. So I just ended up turning it into a one shot. That way I'd have a couple of weeks to prep to start running this Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden.
Yeah.
But
so overall, what are your thoughts on it now that you've kind of read through at least most of the beginning and we've talked about the endings?
I've read through the first 10 towns, and I've skimmed the entire book at this point. There, as always with a new book, there's things I like. There are things I don't like.
So I'll start with things you like, and we'll do the compliment sandwich.
Things I like is the amount of information that's in the book. So I first started playing D&D in 1990, which oddly enough, I think was the year that is right around the same time period that Icewind Dale, the novel, came out. The Crystal Shard was the novel that I first picked up. So Icewind Dale was actually my first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. I had heard of the setting, but I didn't really know. I didn't know shit about role playing games until that point, and I damn sure hadn't really read. I had read like Tolkien stuff, Lord of the Rings trilogy and all, but D&D was a whole new thing to me at that time period. So it's kind of fun getting to come back to Icewind Dale.
Yeah.
I was also I've recently found out that the books have progressed more than 100 years, which I had no clue about. So from the point that the Crystal Shard took place with Kryn Shinabon and the actual tower to the point that the setting is at now, I think is 130 years or more than that, possibly.
Yeah, and it's good to note too that Icewind Dale actually takes place at the end of the Age of Destruction, Calamity, whatever it was.
So 4th edition, or
it takes place at like the last year of what's considered 4th edition.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't play 4th. I never kept up with that sort of arc of things.
Yeah, so this book, from a chronological standpoint, predates everything in 5th edition.
Got it. So it's before the whatever the Ravenloft setting was. It's before the Tiamat book.
Yeah, it's before any of the events that happen in the greater world. Before Tomb of Annihilation, before Waterdeep, before Tyranny of Dragons, before Avernus, the
Sent into Avernus.
Yeah, before any of that happened. So this is a precursor to all of that, and I don't think that it's not really a spoiler. It's good to know like when the time setting of this book is, because that is not really that's a really important part of the whole
For people who
narrative of the
want that,
book.
for people who want that story structure to the world, though, that's important.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to know that happens, or that's kind of like when this begins, and then that's why we haven't heard anything from Icewind Dale from any of the other books.
That could have an effect. So as to what I like about the book, one, the fucking art. I mean, it's a beautiful book. I'm sitting here with my physical copy, and it's really pretty. Like my preference is still always going to be for hand painted art over computer done art. But yeah, some of the art I've found in fifth edition is meh, doesn't really do much for me. But in this one, there's actually some really amazing pictures and things they've done.
Yeah.
Uh, I really kind of dig a lot of the monsters and stuff in the back of the book, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to talk too much about that. Um, there's a lot in this book to be happy about. Uh, the biggest complaint that I have about it, and it's not even that big of a complaint because you know me as a DM, I'm very much a do what you want to do. And I've run a lot of modules over the years. And mind you, this is not a module. This is a campaign. Uh,
Hmm.
but I've run a lot of modules. And modules are supposed to be sort of brief and they breeze you through things. But I'm thinking with a campaign, I really want, I don't know, for quest introductions, I want more than you go to a bar. This dwarf approaches you. You know,
Yeah.
they offer you this amount of money to go do this thing for them. That's just it's almost lazy writing. Now, as a DM, because they always have the little blurbs that you're supposed to read set off in bold color or whatever, so that you know exactly what to read to the players. As a DM, I'm going to ignore a lot of that anyway. I'm going to do the basics of it, but it's going to be my version. It's what I'm going to say as opposed to what's physically written there. For a newer DM, they're just going to read what's there, and it's going to be boring. Uh, yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't want to go too much into it, but yeah, that's just sort of my thoughts on it. It's just bland. A lot of the basic quest introductions are.
So
Hold
I
on,
think
I am literally going to read the introduction to a fucking quest, and there will be no spoilers in this. A bundled up figure walks up briskly to you. Well met. You lot seem like you are looking for work or trouble. You wouldn't be standing around in this cold otherwise. That that's it. That's a quest introduction.
so. The first two chapters of Icewind Dale is like an open sandbox where
Very much so, yeah.
they they want you to get introduced to 10 towns, what's going on there, and they kind of want you to kind of like establish the characters in Icewind Dale.
And
So not only they are establishing themselves, but they're developing a relationship with all of 10 towns.
let me throw chime in on that. That is beautiful. I love the fact that they did that as a sandbox, like your levels 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 or so. It's an open world sandbox. You
Yeah.
pick up quests along the way, and you don't have to do all of them. You don't have to do them in any order. It's just I think there are effectively 3 options for a starting quest, and beyond that, you're just sort of free to run.
So I think what happened is that I think somewhere in the development timeline of this book, there was another chapter somewhere in the book, because I pointed out to you that
Yeah,
in this book there's mention of
in chapter
cultists
8. Yeah.
in chapter 8, but there is no chapter 8. This book actually ends in chapter 7. So my guess is that there was probably a beginning chapter 1 that got cut. And what was weird is on DM's Guild, there is an introduction module that you can buy to Icewind Dale, released by the Guild Adepts who worked on Icewind Dale.
There's your chapter 8 right there.
That's what my guess is. My guess is that was the beginning. That intro quest was the beginning to Icewind Dale, and you can just go pick it up on DM's Guild for $2, $3. And they also basically have released other supplements of material for Icewind Dale from the Guild of Depths as well, people who also worked on the book. And it's just a lot of extra fluff and information. I think it's just all cut content from the book.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, you know as well as I do, when you're writing a book like this, or when you're making movies or anything, there's always going to be stuff that gets cut.
Yeah.
This book is massive. There's a lot of information and a lot of stuff going on in the book. So
And then ultimately, the remaining chapters of the book, you can honestly skip chapters 1 and chapters 2, start at level 5 or level 6, and begin at chapter 3. And
I don't recommend that, but
I don't
you
recommend it.
could,
I'm
yeah.
just saying you could start at level 6, drop them off into town, and then just go do. There's like 3 other kind of story sections in Icewind Dale after the open world scenario,
Hmm.
um, that all take place, all kind of tie into each other, but they are very separate. Think of it kind of like as Cholt was, where you had an opening thing to do, and then eventually found this giant city, then you had all the jungle stuff, and then at the very end you had Tomb of Annihilation. It's very set up very similar to that. So you could, if you just wanted to start at 6 and then start at chapter 3, you can do that perfectly fine.
So
Um,
this is the first of the 5e campaigns that I've ever run or tried to run. I've never even really got to play through any of them. I've played, a few levels here and there and a couple of different ones, but I'm not super familiar with these. Is that the normal sort of process where they have a level 1 to 5 sort of open world, or are most of them going to be very linear?
Most of them are very linear, but a lot of them, I think it was Tyranny of the Dragons, where like the book, the actual like Tyranny of the Dragons doesn't start until 5 or 6, and then like 1 through 5 was kind of like added in as an afterthought. Um, I think they may have some editorial restrictions going on where they don't want books released from 6 to 13, maybe because they think it's going to be a smaller audience. So they
Prob
keep they keep
Yeah.
they keep seeming to designing these great epic things that are between 6 and 13 or 6 and 15, and then going back and filling in everything before 6. And a lot of times it just doesn't click the same.
They are
Waterdeep,
they're not wrong in that aspect though. If I'm going to be buying a campaign and I'm going to be running that, I want to be able to run it from the very beginning.
so here's the funny part is Waterdeep, which is probably one of the better modules in the 5th edition books, um, that actually ends at level 5. 5 or 6, and it's really funny because like you go through the book, you do chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's kind of sandboxy since you're in Waterdeep, but it's still very
Yeah.
straight. Depending on what season you pick, is kind of like what order you do things. Okay, and when you get the Horde of the Dragon, um, at the end of that book, um, you're like I said, you're 5 or 6, and that's it. You're done. There are 4 more chapters in that book that you don't even touch
So
in the main campaign of Waterdeep.
okay, so they wrote that one in reverse. The main campaign is levels 1 to 5, and the extra fluff is levels 6 to 12.
A higher, it's all like 8 to
Oh,
15 or
okay.
so.
Huh.
Because like for example, one of the seasons is I think spring, which is Xanathar. All
Hmm.
right. So
No,
like
no,
if
no,
you
no, 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 no. Let's say it right. It's the Xanathar. It's a title, not a name. It is.
so if you do that and Xanathar is your bad guy, you never actually encounter him through all of Waterdeep. You just foil his plans on getting the Horde. Um, but the layout of his fortress and everything that's in there is in the book, so you could storm his lair and fight him. You're
Yeah,
gonna die.
I know we have talked about this very briefly on the podcast about that. Yeah, don't go fucking with Xanathar at level 10.
But like there's a couple of the other options are really really cool and interesting as well too. But What people do is people kind of like extend Waterdeep by putting some of the MacGuffins that you need to find in their lair,
Hmm.
and to basically open the MacGuffin door to get to the MacGuffin ending.
Yeah.
And
One, one, one great thing
it's
about
kind of
these,
neat.
yeah, one lovely thing about these campaigns though is they do not have to end. Like, yeah, there is an ending technically for this campaign, but there is nothing to say that I then can't go out and write a whole bunch more modules and just keep running my players. Like this one's supposed to be up to level 11 or 12, but if I want to keep rolling till level 20 in Icewind Dale, there's no reason I can't. I mean, you're starting to get to the good levels at that point. Yeah, that's when you
Yeah,
start getting to fight white dragons and actually taking on frost giants a little better.
and Waterdeep is 1 through 12, I think. And we've discussed offline to not to avoid spoilers fully, like the different scenarios that can kind of lead to separate endings in Icewind Dale, and
Yeah,
how to continue doing that story.
there's a
And
lot of possibilities there.
there is. And I kind of honestly wonder what the canonical ending of the thing is going to be.
Probably have to
And
read the
we
novels to find out.
maybe. Speaking
I
of
would,
which, the humble bundle for this month right now is like every single Drizzt book on the face of the planet
yeah, but they're
for
not
like
physical copies.
$15.
Wow. Okay, for $15 for every one of them, I might consider that. And I don't like reading books that aren't physical copies, but man, that's
So
cheap. That's real
my
cheap.
my wife has this face that she makes when she wants something really really bad, but she doesn't want to tell me she wants something really really bad. And I found that humble bundle and I linked it to her. And then like I was just doing some more prep work for Icewind Dale,
Just see that
and like
face coming around the corner.
no, she slowly like snuck into the room and standing by my desk. I didn't even notice her. And then she's standing right there, and I turned to look and was like, "Oh, what do you want?" And she just had that face like, I'm like, "You can get it if you want. Don't eat me." um, so, and I actually asked her, like, which ones of those books would you read? And I think it's the Cleric Quizette was,
Cleric Quintet.
yeah, Quintet. Those are the ones that had a lot of the stuff that is relevant to Icewind Dale.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. The Cleric Quintet wouldn't have hardly anything pertaining to Icewind Dale.
I think
Uh,
that's the one that's the one that had the
no,
whatever thing you mentioned.
the Cleric Quintet was about Catterley, the priest of I don't even remember who is a priest of. Like I don't know. I don't think he's ever even been to Icewind Dale unless it happened way later.
I don't know. I never read the books.
Yeah.
um,
I own the Cleric Quintet around here some damn where.
I thought it's the one that had that crystal tower in there.
No, that's the Crystal Shard.
Okay, yeah. What now? That's the one that she said then.
Yeah, the first three books were the Crystal Shard, Streams of Silver, and the Halfling's Gem. So when Salvatore first wrote those books, Wolfgar the Barbarian was actually supposed to be the main character. And after the first book or so, everybody just sort of latched on to Drizzt. So going forward, he just started writing books about him. So the first three, you can kind of tell that that was not the focus. Then he came back and then wrote the Starless Nights, and basically the birth of Drizzt Do'Urden up to the point that he went to the Overland, and then he picks up after the Halfling's Gem years later. So they were sort of written in the incorrect order.
Yeah, the books have to be good. They seem to do real well. I'm just not a
Salvat- yeah,
fan.
Salvatore has a unique writing style for combat that very few people have, and I think
I have honestly haven't read. I just the characters what bothers me because it seems so tropey. But I say that from someone who's never actually read the books.
so. The thing is, he is tropey, but when they were written, he was not. So it's one of those things of time has turned him into a trope because of how fucking popular that character became. Like
Okay.
in the beginning, once again, he wasn't even the main character. He was a fucking side character. He was an important side character, but he was just a buddy of the barbarian, who is the main focus of the books.
Yeah.
So just you know how popularity is about things. I personally can't fucking stand Wolverine or Deadpool. I know that's going to be a lot blasphemy for a lot of people, but that's
Well, we
because
just lost all our viewers.
yeah, I know we did. I definitely know one of them who's going to be fucking fuming that I said that. Uh, I don't hate them, but they are not something that I don't generally care about them as characters, but it's because of that ridiculous level of popularity they got. Everybody talked about, oh, Wolverine's the greatest X-Men. Oh, Deadpool's the greatest this and that, and you know, that's kind of what happened with Drizzt Do'Urden. He became so popular in the Dungeons and Dragons worlds that everybody just started hating him because so many people loved him. But anyway, we digress once again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was reading through the Legacy of the Crystal Shard, season 16 for a fourth edition, and that's where I pulled all the information that I needed for the one shot.
Was that
And
a campaign? Was that a campaign book?
yeah, essentially,
Okay.
it was for what they called D&D Encounters, which became Adventures League. That's a season 16. It was the books, some books that just came out. I think the Crystal Shard books that just came out, and this was the campaign that focused around those crystal shards. And it was written by R.A. Salvatore.
Yeah, like once again, fourth edition. Not familiar with any of it.
So Legacy of Crystal Shard had come out like at the end of fourth edition, and it was designed by R.A. Salvatore, with Jeffrey Lugwood, James Wyatt, and Matthew Cernit. And that's the reference that I used to write my one shot. I took all that information and just I poured through it like 5 or 6 times, getting the year and trying to place everything correctly.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really good. It's written very well, and I like the world that it was created. So props to that crew. I know R.A. Salvatore had a big hand in helping with Icewind Dale,
Yep.
at least from the perspective of they may have used him for
I
a
mean,
lot of extra information.
he more or less, yeah, like he is more or less the creator of Icewind Dale. Like I'm sure it was on the maps in the setting of Forgotten Realms, but there was no information on that locale until he wrote those novels.
Yeah,
There just wasn't anything. It was this backwater place of frozen tundra.
yeah. And what's funny is that adventure takes place in 1485. The year in the book that I referenced was 1485. The year of this Icewind Dale book is 1489. And so what I found was funny is I looked up Carrot Koenig, and I tried to be as accurate as I could. And since I placed it like 10 years in the future,
Mhm.
my one shot, I figured the speaker of the town would be the same thing. They said it was a young human male that ran Carrot Koenig. But yet in Icewind Dale, it's a drunk dragonborn that's been running the town forever. So there's a few pieces of information that don't match up correctly from
Sure.
previous things, but they're just all like you'd have to be nitpicking and finding.
Yeah, you would have to be doing what you were doing, basically
Yeah,
looking for detailed information for anyone to ever even notice that.
yeah. Overall, like I said, I've read this. I skimmed the book. I read through everything that I needed to just kind of start it. The beginning is kind of wonky, like you mentioned, with the starts in a bar, but I think there are a couple of, like I said, the thing you can buy in DM's Guild is a good lead up
Hmm.
because it kind of leads you into Icewind Dale. But at the same time, I don't like that because the the idea of Icewind Dale is that things suck. Things are the worst they've ever been
And
for the
let's be
past 2 years.
clear on how bad they suck. So Icewind Dale has always been a frozen sort of hellhole. There's barbarian raiders, there's
Mhm.
orcs. Like it's these 10 little towns, and I think the biggest town has about 1,000 people in it. The smallest is about 100. So these are small locales. And you are surrounded on every side by things that want to eat you, murder you, rob you, and leave your corpse out to freeze. Uh, and in this campaign, the average temperature is negative 49 Fahrenheit for any Canadian listeners that we somehow magically have. So that's ridiculously cold. And I know that's a lot colder than things used to be. Yeah, like it's miserable. And that they do a very, very good job when detailing this thing out of how sort of to play that out. You're constantly going to be besieged by the elements, which is wonderful. Like
Yeah,
I love having a survival option. I mean, me and you, we play a lot of survival video games anyway. So having survival as a real threat in a role playing game is kind of, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's underutilized.
which brings me to like the biggest problem I had with the book.
Yeah.
Whereas they establish all these wonderful survival rules about how horrible it is out in the wilderness with the cold and the wind and everything. And then there's just one line that says all these effects are negated if the players are wearing cold weather gear. And then the next line it says all players start with cold weather gear. So
There are still problems with that. While you will not.
only if you get wet, and the only way you can get wet is like to jump in the lake, but the lake is frozen over.
Well, let's be clear. Okay, so it does negate the issues of I think it's exhaustion is what it gives you if you're freezing.
Yeah.
So it will negate those unless you get wet. Now, it does not negate the fact that there are blizzards where you can literally see half distance or less. It does not even remotely negate the movement issues, and there are a lot of movement issues in this. Like
Hmm.
either you have snowshoes or crampons to move about, or you're like you're. I don't think movement in combat is altered much.
I would
Like
say it is. Depends on where you are.
yeah, it's going to depend kind of where you are, but overland travel is massively affected if you don't have snowshoes, crampons, or dog sleds or an axe beak to get around.
Yeah. So you can just go out into the wilderness though. So travel time is slow. As long as you have the rations with you, you're never going to freeze to death with these cold weather clothes. And no matter how many Yeti fights you get in, no matter how many goblin spears you get nicked by, no matter how many axes get sliced your chest open, your cold weather gear is just always there.
But this is Dungeons and Dragons. It's not Rollmaster. I mean,
I know, but it's still the cold weather gear goes over your armor. So I created a magic item of sorts, a common magic item, as I in order to get it to pass through on D&D Beyond. That would basically let the players have cold weather gear that would take breakage amounts and eventually fail and no longer provide any benefits against cold weather.
so I understand what you mean because honestly it's a carryover sort of from our LARP, but detail it out. What is a breakage value?
So in this case, I took just the basic cold weather gear, didn't change anything about it at all, and I gave a set of cold weather gear 10 breakage points. Now, every 5 damage that the players take, is going to reduce the cold weather gear by 1 breakage point. So if you get hit across the chest by an axe and it does 20 damage, that's 4 breakage on the cold weather gear. Um, it's not an additive thing. It's just every 5 points. You just get hit for 4 points forever. It'll never break. Uh, so after 10 breaks, the gear is basically broken. During a short or long rest, the characters can repair the damaged clothing. A DC 12 survival check can repair 1 breakage, and any kind of magical means of repairing clothing repairs 2 breakage points. So It's a little bit of extra micromanagement that the players have to do, but with this magic item, it just sits there in your inventory and you have all the boxes.
Like
And if it,
I just have the feeling that this is going to lead to a lot of people freezing to death.
or just the other thing that I'm also doing is I'm having the players use variant encumbrance. So instead of being able to carry 15 times your strength score in gear, you can only carry 5 times your strength score in gear, which is a little bit more reasonable from this campaign that I want to do.
What do you mean
So
you have
the
30? Wait, what do you mean you have 32 long swords on you?
yeah, exactly. I hate that stuff.
Yeah, so do
I
I.
hate that. Oh, we have 12 tons of silver. We're just gonna throw it in our pouches and carry it back. No, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And
Go to a bank.
be a dwarf that can carry all that stuff,
Oh
or
no, it depends on which game I'm running. But when I was running the gnome campaign, because they're in a highly civilized area of society, like they had banks. All the gnomes had chits that they would utilize for currency. People carried smaller amounts of gold, but nobody's walking around 50,000 gold on them. They have chits worth that much.
right. So, like my wife rolled up her cleric, and her strength score is 10. She can barely carry all of her gear on her.
It sounds like me in the Star Wars game with my 8 strength. And
Yeah,
yeah, I had to specially customize that sniper rifle for me to even be able to use it. Minimum
yeah,
strength was 13, so
because there's a lot of things in this game that are like, okay, we need you to carry this from this town to that town.
there's a
Okay,
lot of that. Yeah, yeah.
so I can do that. Oh, okay, I don't have the strength to carry my gear, my cold weather clothing, and a backup pair of cold weather clothing, and still carry this keg of beer from this town to that town. Oh, it looks like you have to rent a dog sled, and then dog sled stuff. So I just I want weight to matter. I want them to be thoughtful in what they're carrying with them. Other
With a survival game, and this is have no doubt this is a survival game. That it is important. Like weight definitely should matter. If you're encumbered, if you're not able to move at full speed, then you're slowing everybody else down. Party can only
yeah.
move as fast as the slowest person.
Yeah, and I kind of want them to kind of like, if they're going through um, a castle or something like that, you don't have to wear your cold weather gear inside a castle.
Mm.
But maybe it's something you weigh into. Maybe you're not going to leave your gear, at the entrance of the castle, because you're not going to carry it through the castle. But maybe there's a chance you get stuck outside for a little bit, and the cold starts to bother you, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I, I'm trying to find that balance of where it becomes too unwieldy for the players to manage. And I also come from my perspective as a player. Like, if I have to spend too much time doing this, I'm not going to do it.
I
You
I
know,
am a
if
I'm a hardcore strategy gamer, so I honestly I do not mind at all the number crunching aspects, and I personally love it. I understand my players do not.
I will
Uh,
say this, if we were playing pen and paper, Dungeons and Dragons, I would not do any of this.
See, I'm the other way around. I'd rather
But
do it
but
on pen and
because
paper. It's easier for
but,
me.
but because I'm doing it on D&D Beyond, and all the math is automatically done, all the weight is automatically calculated, and you know I can have a magic item in D&D Beyond that has the breakage points on there, already has the boxes there, and in easy, just like click, click, click. Okay, there's the 15 damage. Here's the 3 breaks, and I'm done. You know,
Yeah.
and I think this will work out. Um, I did join the Rime of the Frostmaiden subreddit, and breakable cold weather gear or equivalent of that is the most requested thing.
I mean,
And
I'm not surprised.
I've already had a bunch of people um, find my magic item and add it to their campaign, as well as about 50 views at this point in time.
Nice.
So
Okay. Uh,
it's something definitely people want,
it's
and
it's a it's a variant rule system that I understand why people would want it. I personally will not be utilizing it, but I absolutely get why other people would.
yeah,
One of the other variants that we have talked about, because this is other than the survival aspect, there are a lot of things that focus on the horror aspect of things. My favorite movie of all time, at least my favorite horror movie of all time, is The Thing. Like John Carpenter's The Thing. Love that movie. I probably actually, not even kidding, seen it 100 fucking times. Uh, and the idea is you it they're in the they're basically at the South Pole in the movie. They're isolated from society, and it's freezing cold out there. This game does a good job of trying to make people feel and understand the isolation. Everything just sort of plays that up. Even when you come across people in this game, you can't tell who they are because everybody's bundled up. Like everybody looks the same until you get inside and actually can have a conversation with them. Uh, there's a lot of just horror aspects that went into this game. And me and you were briefly talking about this because of the insanity and madness charts that could easily be utilized in this game. I don't think they actually bring it up in the book specifically, but convenient.
They don't, because the way you're supposed to handle it is supposed to basically, you're supposed to add another like skill, like your strength, dex, con, and wisdom, charisma, insanity, honor. That's the way they want it to work. And then you're supposed to basically use your point buy or roll and have those two extra stats on your character sheet.
Mhm.
And it works in pen and paper. Doesn't work on D&D Beyond or other places. Not even on pen and paper, because they don't bring those things in. There are custom sheets you could download and print out that have those extra blocks on there, but you don't really use that. So the way I've used insanity in the past is, I, as the DM, keep track of the player's sanity. So, like, I'll have a sheet on my side, and I'll have the players make an intelligence save. And let's say they fail that. Okay, well, I'll just mark off one sanity on my sheet side, and I'll usually give them some flavor of like, oh, this is really confusing. It gives you a headache. And then, once they get to like 5 sanity, I'll roll on the madness table, and that effect happens to them for a little bit. And then when they get to 10 insanity, I'll do on the long-term madness table. And then when I get to the 15 mark, they roll on the bigger
Yeah,
table where it's permanent.
well, it's not permanent. It's indefinite, is what they
Yeah,
call it. So it could be whatever amount of time that the DM decides.
and all the indefinite madness table does is add a flaw to the character, which, if your players are really good at role playing, is great. And all the other stuff for like the madness, for the short term and the long term madness, isn't too bad. There's a couple in there that are like disadvantage on all attacks or skill checks.
Well, okay,
And
just a random. Here's a long-term madness. The character experiences a powerful delusion. Choose a potion. The character imagines that he or she is under the effects.
in Tomb of Annihilation, one of the players was stricken with long-term madness in one of the rooms, and I believe it's there where they have to basically consume and eat anything that they see that looks
Oh,
horrible. So it's a
okay.
short-term madness that the player got in TOA, as is a character experiencing an overpowering urge to eat something strange, such as dirt, slime, or offal.
There are
Okay.
actually some people who have like a mental disorder where they like to eat dirt. Really weird. Or metal shavings. That's another one.
Again, the problem in this time is that the room that they got this madness was level 3 of TOA. And for those
Okay.
familiar, that's the level where the beholder has kind of ruined it. The beholder. That's the level that the beholder has basically been placed in. So the entire room and entire level is like filled with this purple like alien growth.
Lord.
And if you touch it or damage it, an eye stalk pops out of the growth and attacks you with one of the beholder's random eye rays.
Oh my God.
So and this is before we started doing the podcast, or I would have talked about it on the podcast. The player got the overpowering urge to eat something strange. The alien slime was right there. So she ran over to it, started ripping it apart and eating it. So
Ah,
the beholder eye popped up out of nowhere. I rolled random. I got disintegrate. She was disintegrated.
ah, yay! Tomb of Annihilation.
Hooray!
Oh, hey, so interesting. We actually had a permanent character death tonight. Long live
Oh,
Arthur. Long live Arthur. Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. But we were playing the Maw campaign. You know, the all undead all the time, and we got into this fight with I think they're called gloom stalkers is what they were referred to. Basically, they're giant bat people, and they'll swoop in, they'll hit you a couple times, then drag you off into the air and drop you. And we've handled them before, but they're a tough fight. So we ended up getting into a scrap with them. They dropped one of the characters. You know, he was already unconscious, so that he was pretty much at 2 death saves. Failed already at that point when he hit the ground. We ended the combat. I'm unconscious at this point. So our cleric is up and the other ranger is up. So the one ranger that was up runs over and grabs the other guy that was down, and there was an NPC that was nearby. So he drags him over to that guy and says, "Hey, do you guys have a cleric around here?" And then he fails the next death save. So at that point, he's actually dead. After that was over with, I pointed out that the guy should have just grabbed a healing potion and poured it down his throat, but too late. You live, you learn. Hopefully, he remembers next time, Drew. So then we ended up hauling this guy back 7 days of travel through the Maw back just to get back to civilization. We pay the fee to get this guy resurrected, and he says no. Like, you motherfucker. We spent 7 goddamn days of travel through a hellhole just to get your stupid ass resurrected so you didn't turn into a fucking zombie in the Maw. And you say no. It- like, if my character dies, my goodness, I'm finding out where he is at in heaven, and I'm beating that money that he owes us out of him.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing.
Props to the fucking player. It was beautiful. I loved it. It's more of an in-play rant than an out-of-play one.
Yeah, we're doing our campaign, and I'm the only healer. I'm also the frontline tank. So I've been very careful with all my heals. But
Yeah, yeah.
we haven't had any close calls yet.
I
So
attack. I heal myself. I attack. I heal myself.
the only time I've had to do a lot of healing was actually this level, because like everyone was bloodied, and I have an AoE thing that helps if you're
Okay.
bloodied. So I healed everybody that way, and then I use lay on hands on myself for all my life because I saved me first. Um,
If you're the healer, save yourself first.
but I did get stuck in like a swarm of bats, and like 20 stirges attacked me. So I come walking out of a swarm of bats with like 7 stirges stuck to my
Yeah,
skin.
you look like you look like damn Pinhead from the Hellraiser movies with stirges all over the place.
The
Uh,
best part too was is they all basically did their initial attack and hit me, and it's a 1d4 plus 2 or 3 or something like
mhm.
that. And I have a heavy armor mastery, so all damage that's not magical of just bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing is reduced by 3. So they're hitting me for like 3, 4, 5, 1, 7. So like it did like no damage to have me walk out just full of stirges.
I have to say I love stirges. Just the thought of giant mosquito birds. That's all this is. It's giant fucking mosquito birds.
Yeah, and one of the other players who's the more veteran player, he was like, "Yeah, it's in third edition. I was like, these things just hit your con for these
Oh,
amounts."
oh god, yeah, they'd fuck you up in third edition.
Yeah, and it's really kind of sad that there's nothing that deadly in fifth.
No, there really isn't.
There's a
There
couple
really isn't.
things, but it's not like
Even basilisk are not terrifying. In third edition, they were terrifying. Getting turned to stone was god awful. In this edition, you get 2 saving throws against it.
Yeah,
You know,
it's really weird.
and even then, it's really simple to sort of get out of it once you're turned to stone. So I say really simple. It's reasonably simple. I think it takes a greater restoration, but that's still not that hard.
No, it's pretty easy to come back. It's not as bad as fourth edition where like everybody was like immortal, but it's still pretty hard to drop somebody and then keep them down. Um,
Fifth edition is a nice balance for game flow, but the lethality of it kind of pales in comparison to previous editions. Before fourth, at least.
so yeah, overall, Icewind Dale is a really good book. Can't
Can't
talk
wait.
about it too
Yeah,
much
can't wait to start
because
running it though. And then once we start running it, we're probably going to have to start talking about parts of it at least.
I'll definitely give recaps of what they do, for sure.
Yeah.
But I did want to bring up one thing. It is hard for me to find maps that I like. So another thing to kind of go with the whole survival desolation thing. Wood doesn't grow in Icewind Dale.
It
There are
does,
not
but
seasons.
only really up around Lonely Wood. Most of it is
There
just yeah,
there are no seasons in Icewind Dale. There's winter and
winter.
half winter and warm winter and then cold winter. There's trees don't grow. Even evergreens don't grow that fast. And it's been super ugly, horrible winter for the past 2 years. So wood is more than super rare. And when I look for maps on like Reddit or battle maps or just Googling, every freaking winter map is just covered
In
in
trees.
pine trees, in trees. Like if I put them on the map and they know wood, a tree can bring them 100 gold.
Yeah.
Okay. They're going to be hacking these goddamn trees down and bringing them back to town and selling them for 100 gold.
Yep. Let's go rent us a couple of dog sleds. Let's get this done.
So it just annoys me.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Like they specifically point out in Icewind Dale that certain towns use wood for heat, but a lot of the towns are using whale blubber or coal, things of that nature. Wood, yeah, it once again, I think Lonely Wood is probably the only place that has consistent access to it, and it's not much of a town. Like it's one of the smaller ones.
Yeah, let me look something up real quick too. So one of the maps that I found that I gave you and a couple other DMs for reference is that grid map with the 4 miles on it,
Hmm.
which is probably the best map to.
The Icewind Dale grid map.
Yes.
Yeah, I will be using that, by the way. I don't know who
There
put that together, but it's awesome.
there's the 1 mile and then there's the 4 mile one.
Yeah.
So if I look at it right here, Lonely Wood is 8, 12 miles altogether. They could probably fit the entire forest of Lonely Wood into maybe 2.5, 4 mile grids.
Mhm.
And that's it. Goodmead has a grid of trees by it, and the Spine of the World has a bunch of trees.
Yep. And
So,
Lonely Wood is 100 freaking people. Like it's
right.
tiny.
So one tree ration can last a while.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think I think Bryn Shander is 20,000.
No, it's the biggest, but it's only 1,000. There's a couple of them that are about the same size, and Bryn might be 2,000. There,
Yeah,
there are a few of them that are
1,200.
1,000,
It has
1,200.
1,200 people in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the largest place there.
So there's no trees around Bryn Shander. So like, why does all these damn battle maps have trees covering them? And so like I've been sifting through hundreds of just maps that people have made, and they're good maps. They're great maps, fantastic maps, best maps I've ever seen. But
Useful for what you need.
stop putting trees in the middle of a blustery wilderness map that's supposed to be just the
Yeah.
North Pole.
Yeah, especially if you're out on a glacier or out near the frozen sea, things like no, there's no trees growing out there. There are very few trees growing north of the spine of the world.
Yeah. So that's really my only rant is too many trees.
It's a good rant because it I mean it It's true. Yeah. Just I love that people make maps, and if it has trees, I'm still probably just going to use it if I need it. But I prefer to get it kind of right. And with Icewind Dale, man, it's ice and mountains. It's ice and mountains everywhere. No trees,
Yeah.
just ice and mountains.
Yep. It definitely is, and
I think we've
I,
complained enough.
uh, like I said, overall, this book for me is an 8 out of 10, and the only points that I deduct is just you have to do a lot of front end work as a DM to get chapters 1 and 2 rolling. There's just so much extra effort you have to put in to get those things working and to establish the appropriate mood.
Oh, I'm not even going to
Um,
talk about all the extra work I'm having to do to run this online. Like if
yeah.
I spent, I don't know, 4 hours the other day just getting things set for roll 20, and I've got many hours to go before I'm even able to try to run this thing.
So last thing I'll mention though is, speaking of running it online, we are going to be streaming my campaign of Icewind Dale on Twitch. Uh, our first episode will be October 17th.
That is the
At
plan, assuming everybody can get it to work and go forth.
Everyone can get to work. So what we'll be streaming is, we'll be streaming my computer and my setup, so you'll be seeing everything from the DM side. Um, and then I'll have the players probably on the right side or something.
So
And
what's the date again?
October 17th at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
You'll have to post your Twitch stuff with this.
Yes. I have to get all set up. It'll
we're,
be all
we're,
set
we're
up by then.
we're totally on top of this.
I'm not
I
procrastinating.
Yeah, not at all. And that'll be him streaming it. I will not be in on this one. So, but maybe at a later point, maybe at a later date.
You can come pinch hit DM for me when I don't want to.
Ooh, you're asking a lot. I don't run because you run on a completely different setup than I do. I do roll 20, man.
You just hop on Discord and like, all right, guys, give me a death save. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna free ball this one and see how this ends up. I swear I won't kill all the players on accident.
I actually don't think they're going to die a lot, to be honest. I think there's going to be a lot of horror, and I think there's going to be a lot of potential if they don't plan to die. But I don't think it's
I
going to
will
be.
say there are definitely things you can run into because there's wilderness encounters, man. If players are not smart enough to run away on occasion, you will definitely die in this.
Yes.
So learn to beat feet, folks. Get your running shoes set, or learn to hide.
Yep. All right. That should do it.
Yep. All right. Bye, Craig. Thanks for hanging out with us. See you next week. Bye, Craig.